was the greatest prophet who ever lived. He spoke with God face to face, something no other human being in history has ever done. He split the Red Sea. He called down plagues on the most powerful empire on earth. He led 2 million people through 40 years of desert. And at the end of his life, when he begged God for one small thing, God said 4 words that ended everything. That is enough. Not "I forgive you." Not a second chance. Not even a maybe. Just enough. Stop asking. The matter is closed forever. And what triggered this? Not murder, not idolatry, not betraying his people. He hit a rock. But what really happened in that moment had nothing to do with the rock. And once you understand why God refused to forgive him, you'll never read this story the same way again. I'm going to tell you something in this video that most pastors won't. Half of you are going to disagree with me by the end. You're going to hit the comments to tell me I got it wrong. Good. That means you're actually paying attention. Because this story is not the comfortable Sunday school version you grew up with. This is the story of a man who gave God 40 years of his life, did everything right, and still lost the one thing he wanted more than anything else. A man who was attacked by God himself at least twice before the rock. A man whose own brother and sister betrayed him. A man whose body was fought over by angels and demons after he died. And to understand why God refused to forgive him for one moment of anger, we have to go back to the beginning. Not to the rock, not to the desert, to a baby in a basket on a river full of death. For 400 years, the people of Israel had been slaves in Egypt. Not guests, not workers, slaves. They built Pharaoh's cities under the sun, with no pay, no rights, and no hope of freedom. Generation after generation, they worked the brick pits and construction sites of an empire that treated them as property. And the Pharaoh had a problem. The Israelites were multiplying too fast. He was terrified they'd rise up and rebel. So he made a decision that still sends chills down your spine. Every newborn Hebrew boy would be thrown into the Nile. Imagine being a mother in that moment. You've just given birth to a son, and you know that Pharaoh's soldiers could knock on your door at any second. You can hear them going house to house. Every cry from your newborn could be the sound that ends his life. Jochebed, Moses' mother, hid her son for 3 months. 3 months of sleepless nights. 3 months of silencing every whimper. 3 months of praying the soldiers wouldn't come. Then she did something desperate and brilliant. She waterproofed a basket with tar and pitch, placed her baby inside, and set it adrift on the same river where Hebrew babies were being drowned. Her daughter Miriam followed along the bank to see what would happen. Think about the faith that took. She placed her child in the river of death. She let go and trusted God with a future she couldn't see. And here the story takes a turn that feels like it was written by Hollywood. Pharaoh's own daughter found the basket. She knew the baby was Hebrew. She knew her father had ordered his death. And she chose to save him anyway. But watch what happened next, because most people miss this detail. Miriam, who had been watching from the reeds, approached the princess and offered to find a Hebrew nursemaid. The princess agreed, and the woman Miriam brought back was Jochebed, Moses' own mother. For the first years of his life, Moses was raised by his biological mother inside the palace of the man who wanted him dead. She fed him, she sang to him, she whispered the truth to him before he could even understand words. "You are not Egyptian, you are Hebrew, you belong to a people in chains." That double identity would haunt him for the rest of his life. And here's something the Sunday school version leaves out. Moses grew up in the most elite education system the ancient world had ever produced. He didn't just learn to read and write. He was trained as royalty. He studied military strategy, diplomacy, astronomy, mathematics, and the magical arts of Egypt's priests. Some ancient historians even say he led Egyptian armies into battle in his youth. Let that land for a second. The man who would one day stand before Pharaoh and demand the impossible wasn't some desert hermit. He was trained by the same system he would eventually destroy. He spoke Pharaoh's language. He understood Egypt's gods. He knew the weaknesses of its military. God didn't just pick a shepherd and hope for the best. God had been preparing this weapon for 40 years inside the enemy's own palace. But Moses was not at peace. He ate from Pharaoh's table while his people were whipped in the fields. He wore silk while they wore rags. He was called son by the princess while his real mother served as a slave. Every day of his royal life, the guilt grew heavier. And then, one day, he saw an Egyptian overseer beating an Israelite slave. Something inside him snapped. He looked left. He looked right. And when he thought no one was watching, he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. This was not a heroic act. This was rage. 40 years of guilt and conflicted identity exploding in a single violent moment. And remember this, because it matters. The first real decision Moses ever made in his life, he made out of anger. He didn't ask God. He didn't plan. He reacted, and it ruined his life. Because the next day, when he tried to break up a fight between two Israelites, one of them said the words that stopped him cold. "Are you going to kill me too, like you killed the Egyptian?" The secret was out. When Pharaoh found out, Moses had to run for his life. From Prince of Egypt to fugitive shepherd in the desert of Midian, in a single week he lost everything: wealth, title, power, identity. All of it erased because he couldn't control his temper. And here's the bitter irony. 40 years later, at a rock in the desert, he would lose everything again, for the exact same reason. He stayed in Midian for 40 years, not 40 days, not 40 months, 40 years, an entire second lifetime in silence, in obscurity, in a desert where nothing happened and nobody knew his name. He married a woman named Zipporah, daughter of a Midianite priest named Jethro. And here's a detail the text drops almost in passing that becomes enormous later. Zipporah was a Cushite, dark-skinned, foreign, a woman who would one day become the reason Moses' own siblings turned against him. But we'll get to that. During those 40 years, Moses probably thought his life was over, that God had forgotten him, that whatever purpose he might have had died the day he killed that Egyptian. But God had not forgotten. He was preparing something. He was also preparing Moses, because the impulsive prince who killed a man in anger was not ready to lead a nation. It took 40 years of humility, patience, and silence to shape him into the man God needed, until the day he saw a bush on fire that wasn't burning up. The flames crackled and danced, but the branches stayed intact. The leaves didn't curl. The wood didn't turn to ash. Moses walked closer to investigate, and then something happened that no human being had ever experienced before. A voice came out of the fire. "Moses, Moses, take off your sandals. The place where you are standing is holy ground." God revealed his plan. Moses was to go back to Egypt and free 2 million slaves. At 80 years old, a fugitive shepherd with a murder on his record and a speech impediment was about to be sent to confront the most powerful ruler on earth. And here's what most tellings skip. Moses didn't just object once. He objected 7 times. 7 times he tried to talk God out of it. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" God answered. Moses objected again. "What if they ask your name? What do I tell them?" God answered. Moses objected again. "What if they don't believe me? What if they say God never appeared to me?" God gave him miraculous signs. Moses objected again. "I'm not eloquent. I'm slow of speech. I'm slow of tongue." God reminded him he was the one who made mouths. Moses objected again. And then, finally, he said the words that crossed the line. "Please, Lord, send someone else." And watch what happens next. The Bible says something most sermons skip. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. God got angry. At Moses, not at Pharaoh, not at the Israelites, at the man he had just called. The hero of the story made God angry before the story even started. This was the first time Moses provoked God's anger. It would not be the last. God compromised. He gave Moses his brother Aaron as a spokesman. He gave him the staff that would become the most powerful object in the ancient world. And he sent Moses back to Egypt. But there's a passage most Christians have never heard about. Right after this, on the journey back, something happened that has puzzled scholars for 2,000 years. Exodus chapter 4, verse 24. The Bible says this: "At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and tried to kill him." Tried to kill him, the God who had just commissioned him. Tried to kill him. What happened? Moses had never circumcised his own son. Zipporah, his wife, grabbed a sharp stone in the middle of the night, performed the circumcision herself, and threw the foreskin at Moses' feet. And God let him live. Most pastors skip this passage because they don't know what to do with it. But it tells us something crucial. Before Moses ever got to Egypt, before the plagues, before the Red Sea, before Sinai, he had already disobeyed God in a private matter. Something small, something personal, something nobody would have seen except God. And it almost cost him his life. Remember this pattern. Moses disobeys God in a detail that seems minor. God responds with force. This is the third time it will happen. The rock at Kadesh will be the final time. Moses arrived in Egypt, not as a prince this time, as a prophet, with one message: "Let my people go." Pharaoh's answer, no. And not only no, he made the slaves' conditions even worse. The Israelite foreman came to Moses and cursed him for making their lives harder. Moses went back to God, discouraged. "Why did you send me? Everything is worse now." But God was just beginning. And what followed wasn't just punishment. It was a divine trial, a war, not between Moses and Pharaoh, between the God of Israel and the gods of Egypt. And this is something most Christians have never been taught. Every single one of the 10 plagues targeted a specific Egyptian god. God wasn't just causing suffering, he was executing judgment on an entire pantheon, one deity at a time. The first plague. The Nile turned to blood. The Egyptians worshipped Hapi, the god of the Nile. He was the god of life, of harvests, of fertility. Every year the Nile flooded and brought abundance. The Egyptians believed Hapi was the reason their civilization existed. God turned him into a river of death. The second plague, frogs, millions of them. The Egyptians worshipped Heket, a goddess with the head of a frog. She was the goddess of fertility and childbirth. Women wore amulets of her for protection. God sent so many frogs that they couldn't be buried fast enough, and the land stank with the rot of the goddess Egypt had worshipped. The third plague, gnats. This one targeted Geb, the god of the earth. Egyptian priests believed they could reproduce miracles by magic, But when God sent the gnats, even the priests admitted they couldn't replicate it. They told Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." The magicians of Egypt confessed defeat. The fourth plague. Flies. This targeted Khepri, the god of creation who had the head of a fly. The god who was supposed to bring life was buried under the swarms sent by the God of Israel. The fifth plague, the death of Egyptian livestock. Egypt worshipped the bull Apis as a living god. They worshipped Hathor, the cow goddess. They had shrines to sacred cattle all across the empire. God killed every Egyptian animal. The Israelites lost none. The sixth plague, boils on every Egyptian. This targeted Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of healing, and Imhotep, the deified healer. The gods of medicine couldn't protect their own people. The seventh plague, hail mixed with fire. Nut was the sky goddess. Shu was the god of air. Horus commanded the storms. All three failed as fire fell from a sky that was supposed to be under their control. The eighth plague, locusts devouring what the hail had left. Sennacherib was the Egyptian protector god against pests. He was powerless against the swarms God sent. The ninth plague, 3 days of darkness so thick you could feel it. This was the ultimate humiliation. Ra, the sun god, was the most powerful deity in the Egyptian pantheon. Pharaoh himself claimed to be Ra's son. For 3 days, the sun god disappeared. Ra, the king of the gods, was proven to be nothing. And then the 10th plague, the one that ended everything. God had already humiliated every major god of Egypt, but there was one left. The most important one of all, Pharaoh himself. Egyptians believed Pharaoh was not a man, but a god in human form. His firstborn son was considered the incarnation of divinity, and so God struck where it hurt most. Every firstborn son in Egypt died in a single night. From the son of Pharaoh in his palace to the son of the slave at the mill. The heir of the god-king lay dead in his bed. The wailing could be heard across the entire nation, and Pharaoh, who had sworn he'd never let Israel go, summoned Moses in the middle of the night and said the words Israel had waited 430 years to hear. "Go, take everything and go." 2 million people marched out of Egypt, the largest exodus in human history. But when they reached the Red Sea, Pharaoh changed his mind one last time. 600 war chariots closed in behind them. The sea was in front of them. There was no way out, until Moses raised his staff and the waters split. 2 walls of water on either side, a dry path through the middle. 2 million people walked through the impossible, and when the Egyptian army tried to follow, the waters closed. Every soldier, every horse, every chariot, gone. This was the peak of Moses' life, the moment that made him a legend. And 3 days after the greatest miracle in human history, the people started complaining. 3 days, 72 hours after God split an ocean for them, they were already angry. There was no water, then no food, then too much of the same food. God sent them manna from heaven, free bread, delivered to their doorstep every morning for 2 million people. You know how long their gratitude lasted? A few weeks. At a place called Rephidim, they ran out of water again. The people were so angry they were ready to stone Moses. And God gave Moses a specific instruction. "Take your staff, strike the rock at Horeb. Water will come out of it." Moses obeyed. He struck the rock. Water poured out. The people drank. Burn this moment into your memory. God said, "Strike the rock," and Moses struck it. Everything worked perfectly. The miracle happened exactly as God commanded, because 40 years from now, at another rock, God will give a different instruction, and Moses will do the wrong thing, and it will cost him the promised land. 3 months after leaving Egypt, the people reached Mount Sinai, and God himself descended onto the mountain. Fire, thunder, earthquakes, trumpets blaring from the sky. The mountain shook like it was alive. Smoke rose like a furnace. The people were so terrified they begged Moses to go up alone because they were afraid God's voice would kill them. Moses climbed, and he stayed on that mountain for 40 days, receiving the law directly from the hand of God. And while he was gone, the people did something so unbelievable it almost destroys the story. They got impatient. They went to Aaron, Moses' brother, and said, "Make us a god." Aaron collected their gold jewelry, melted it down, and formed a calf, an idol. And the same people who had watched God humiliate every god of Egypt started dancing around a statue made from their earrings. When Moses came back down the mountain and saw what they'd done, his anger burned so hot that he threw the stone tablets written by the finger of God onto the ground and shattered them. God wanted to destroy the entire nation. He told Moses he would wipe out Israel and start over, build a new nation from Moses alone. And Moses said no. He stood between God and the people. He interceded. He said one of the most courageous sentences in the entire Bible. "If you won't forgive them, then blot me out of your book too." Moses was willing to be erased from existence for people who had just betrayed God to his face. He offered his own salvation to save theirs. Remember this. This is the man we are about to watch lose everything for a moment of anger. A man who loved his people more than his own soul. What followed was 40 years of a nightmare. The cycle never changed. The people complained. God provided. The people forgot. They complained again. Water, food, enemies, leadership. Every single week, someone was unhappy. But 3 moments in those 40 years reveal why Moses finally broke at the rock. The first was the rebellion of Korah. Korah was Moses' own cousin, a Levite, someone who had walked beside Moses for decades. And one day he stood up with 250 of Israel's top leaders and said, "Why do you set yourself above us? We are all holy. Who made you king?" It was a coup, an organized revolt of the most respected men in the nation. They were coming to take Moses' authority. Moses didn't fight them. He fell on his face before God. And what happened next was one of the most terrifying moments in the Bible. The ground opened up, literally split apart, and Korah and his family and all his followers fell into the earth alive, screaming. The ground closed over them. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed the 250 leaders. The next day, the rest of the nation rebelled against Moses again. "You have killed the Lord's people." God sent a plague. 14,700 people died before Aaron could run into the camp with incense to stop it. Think about the weight of this. Moses' own cousin had tried to kill him. His authority had been challenged by the most respected men in Israel, and the punishment had been biblical, literal ground-swallowing people alive. How do you lead a nation after that? How do you not become paranoid? But that wasn't even the worst betrayal. The worst came from his own family. Numbers chapter 12. Miriam and Aaron. Moses' older sister, the one who had saved his life as a baby, and Moses' brother, the man who had spoken for him in Pharaoh's court. These two, the two people closest to him on earth, turned on him. And the reason they gave was almost petty. They were angry that Moses had married a Cushite woman, a foreigner, a woman with dark skin. They said, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us?" They were jealous. of their own brother. God called all three of them out in front of the tabernacle, and what he said changed everything. Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth clearly, and not in riddles. God defended Moses to his own family, and then struck Miriam with leprosy as punishment. And here's the part that breaks you. When Miriam was covered in sores, dying on the outside of the camp, Moses prayed for her. The sister who had just betrayed him, the sister who had just tried to take his authority. He prayed, "Heal her, O God, I beg you." God healed her, but she had to stay outside the camp for 7 days. 7 days of shame. 7 days for everyone to see what happens when you speak against God's chosen servant. This is the brother she would die next to at Kadesh. The third moment came from outside the camp. A king named Balak, ruler of Moab, was terrified of Israel. He hired a pagan prophet named Balaam to curse Israel. Balaam was the real deal. He could summon curses that actually worked. Balak paid him a fortune, but every time Balaam opened his mouth, blessings came out, not curses. Blessings. He tried 3 different times, 3 different mountains, 3 different sacrifices. Every time he prophesied Israel's victory and Moab's defeat, against his own will, against his own payment. And in the middle of this, Balaam's donkey spoke to him out loud. The donkey saw an angel in the road and refused to move. Balaam beat her. She asked him, in human speech, why he was hitting her. Israel never even knew this was happening. They didn't know a pagan prophet was trying to curse them from a mountaintop. They didn't know God was rerouting those curses into blessings. They didn't know a donkey had argued theology with a sorcerer, but God was fighting invisible wars for them. Wars Moses would never see. Wars Israel would never thank him for. This is the context that matters when we get to the rock. Moses had led these people through 40 years of ingratitude. He had survived a family betrayal. He had watched the ground swallow rebels alive. He had been attacked by God himself more than once. He had been protected from enemies he didn't even know existed. And the people still complained, still rebelled, still threatened to go back to Egypt. 40 years of this. And then came Kadesh. Numbers chapter 20 opens with a sentence that is brief and devastating. The people arrived at the desert of Zin and stayed at Kadesh. There Miriam died and was buried. Miriam, Moses' older sister, the girl who had followed the basket down the Nile when he was 3 months old, the woman who had saved his life, the sister who had led the women of Israel in song and dance after the Red Sea, the sister who had betrayed him, been struck with leprosy, and healed because he prayed for her. Dead. The Bible gives her half a line. No eulogy, no mourning period, just a sentence, and the text moves on. This is a detail that gets glossed over in most tellings, and it changes everything. The ancient rabbis said the well that followed Israel through the desert existed because of Miriam's merit. When she died, the water stopped. And the very next verse? Now there was no water for the community. The people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron, and they said the exact words their parents had said 40 years earlier. Why did you bring us into this wilderness to die? Why did you bring us out of Egypt? There is no grain, no figs, no vines, no pomegranates, and no water to drink. 40 years of miracles, 40 years of God providing, and the complaints were identical, word for word, as if nothing had ever changed. This is the emotional context that changes how we read what happened next. Moses was not in a calm state of mind. He had just buried his sister, his oldest sibling, the last person on earth who remembered him as a baby, the woman who had saved his life when he was 3 months old. And he had no time to grieve, no time to sit with the loss, no time to breathe. The same script was playing out again, as if someone had hit rewind on his worst nightmare. Moses and Aaron did what they always did. They withdrew to the tabernacle and fell face down before God, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And God gave Moses a specific instruction. Listen to this carefully. Every word matters. Take the staff, gather the assembly, you and your brother Aaron. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community, so they and their livestock can drink. Take the staff, but speak to the rock. Don't strike it. Speak to it. This was different from the first time. At Rephidim, God said, strike. This time, God said, speak. Just speak. Sounds like a minor detail, right? Strike it, speak to it. What difference does it make? The water comes out either way. But for God, the difference was enormous. And you're about to understand why. Moses took the staff. He gathered the people in front of the rock. So far, he was doing everything right. But then something broke inside him. Years of grief, exhaustion, rage, and betrayal all collapsed into one moment. Instead of speaking to the rock, Moses turned to the people and said something he should never have said. Listen, you rebels. Must we bring you water out of this rock? Must we? Moses and Aaron, as if they were the ones performing the miracle, as if their power, their patience, their effort was what made water come from stone. Then he raised the staff and struck the rock, not once, twice, 2 angry blows against the stone. The water came out anyway. It gushed out in abundance. The people drank, the livestock drank. From the outside, everything looked normal, but God was not impressed by the result. He was devastated by the process. And the words that followed are among the heaviest in the entire Bible. Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them. In a single moment, in a few seconds of anger, the man who had sacrificed his entire life for this mission lost the right to complete it, and he wasn't the only one. Aaron, standing next to him, was sentenced too. The brother who had spoken for Moses in Pharaoh's court. The brother who had held up his arms during the battle with Amalek. The brother who had made the golden calf but been forgiven. Aaron would die before entering the land. There was no appeal. There was no second chance. The sentence was final. Was God fair, or was he cruel? Drop it in the comments before you hear the rest, because by the end of this video, you might change your mind. Weeks later, Aaron climbed Mount Hor. Moses climbed with him. So did Aaron's son Eleazar, and in front of the whole nation, Moses stripped the priestly garments off his own brother and placed them on Eleazar. Aaron lay down on the mountain and died. Moses buried his brother, the second sibling he would lose in the same year. Miriam at Kadesh, Aaron at Hor, Moses alone now, the last of the 3 who had stood before Pharaoh together. And he still had to lead a nation that didn't appreciate what it had cost him. To understand what actually happened at the rock, we have to break this moment down piece by piece, because Moses didn't make one mistake, he made 4. First, Moses took the credit. Must we bring you water? He didn't say God will bring water, he said we. After 40 years as God's servant, he put himself at the center of a miracle that wasn't his. Second, he disobeyed the specific instruction. God said, "Speak." Moses struck. Twice. You don't accidentally hit a rock twice when God told you to talk to it. That was a deliberate choice made in rage. Third, he acted out of anger, not faith. The text says Moses did not trust God. He didn't trust the way God wanted to work in that moment. He defaulted to what had worked before instead of trusting what God was asking now. And the fourth mistake, the deepest one, he failed to honor God as holy in front of 2 million witnesses. He showed them an angry God instead of a generous one, a God who had to be beaten into providing. Every one of those messages was a lie about who God is. But here's where this story becomes explosive. And this is the part most sermons skip entirely. The Apostle Paul, writing in the New Testament, said something that reframes everything. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, he wrote that the rock was Christ, not literally, prophetically. The rock in the desert was a foreshadowing of what Jesus Christ would do 1,000 years later. The first time, at Rephidim, God told Moses to strike the rock. The rock was struck. Water flowed. This represented the crucifixion. Christ would be struck once, on the cross, and from that single sacrifice would flow the water of life. The second time at Kadesh, God told Moses not to strike it again. Why? Because Christ was not meant to be crucified twice. The sacrifice on the cross was sufficient, complete, final. After the cross, you don't strike again. You only ask. You only speak. The grace is already available. The water is already there, waiting to flow at a word. When Moses struck the rock a second time, he unknowingly distorted the most important message in the history of salvation. He symbolically declared that one sacrifice wasn't enough, that God's grace needed to be beaten out of him a second time. That violence was still required. Moses couldn't have known this. He lived more than 1,000 years before Christ. But God knew. God saw the entire timeline of human history, and the precision of the symbolism was essential. This doesn't make the punishment feel fair in human terms, but it makes it understandable. You can forgive a man. You cannot unbreak a prophecy. And there's a second principle at play here, one that runs through the entire Bible. To whom much is given, much will be required. No human being in history up to that point had received more than Moses. Face-to-face conversations with God, miracles that rewrote the laws of physics, the law written by God's own finger. Moses was God's ambassador on earth. Every gesture, every word, every decision in front of that crowd was a sermon about who God is. And in that moment, what did his sermon say? That God is impatient, that God has to be forced to give, that credit belongs to human leaders, that grace comes through violence. Every one of those messages was a lie, and the lie was broadcast to 2 million witnesses. And here's what makes this even harder to accept. Moses isn't the only one. God did something similar to David, the man called after God's own heart. David committed adultery and murder, and God forgave him. But the baby conceived from that sin died. The consequence stood, even after full forgiveness. He did it to Saul, one act of disobedience, and the crown was ripped from his line forever. No second chance, no restoration. Saul died on a battlefield by his own sword, abandoned by God, haunted by demons. He did it to Eli the priest, whose sons dishonored the tabernacle. Eli wasn't even the sinner. His sons were. But because he failed to stop them, his entire priestly line was cut off. His grandchildren bore the curse he never personally committed. There's a pattern in the Bible. that nobody wants to talk about. God forgives the person. God keeps the consequence. Love does not always mean lifting the sentence. And for Moses, the man closest to God's own heart, the consequence was the heaviest of all. Here's a detail most people miss. Moses didn't accept the sentence quietly. He begged God to change his mind. In Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 25, Moses prayed one of the most vulnerable prayers in the entire Bible. O sovereign Lord, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. What God is there in heaven or on earth who can do the deeds you do? Please, let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that fine hill country and Lebanon. Can you hear the longing in those words? After a lifetime of walking toward this one destination, all he wanted was to cross a river, just to feel the grass of Canaan beneath his feet, to see the land he had dreamed of for 80 years. And God's answer came back in 3 words that closed the door forever. That is enough. Not I forgive you. Not I've reconsidered. Not let me think about it. Enough. Stop asking. The matter is closed. Think about who this is. The man who spoke to God face to face. The man who offered to be blotted out of God's own book for people who had betrayed him. The man who interceded when God wanted to wipe out the nation. The man who healed his own sister after she slandered him. That man asked for one thing, just to cross a river, and God said no. Some acts don't get forgiven, some doors stay closed, and love doesn't always mean lifting the sentence. And what Moses did next reveals more about his character than any miracle ever could. He didn't give up. He didn't sit in a corner and feel sorry for himself. He didn't become bitter. He didn't sabotage Joshua. He didn't undermine the mission he could no longer complete. He did the exact opposite. He spent his final months pouring everything he had into preparing the people for what would come after him. The entire book of Deuteronomy is his farewell address, his spiritual legacy to a nation that had broken his heart 1,000 times. He recited the entire history of their journey. He reminded them of every miracle, every rebellion, every failure, every grace. He gave them laws for how to live in the land he would never enter. He taught them songs to sing after he was gone. And then he wrote something that scholars still argue about 2,000 years later. Deuteronomy chapter 34 describes Moses' own death. In detail, his climb up the mountain, what he saw from the summit, his last breath, his burial by God, even the sentence, "No prophet has risen in Israel like Moses since." But Moses wrote Deuteronomy, so how could he write about his own death and burial? Some rabbis say Joshua finished the book. Others say Moses wrote it in advance, under prophetic inspiration, describing events he had seen in a vision. We don't know for sure, but the strangeness is there in the text, waiting for anyone who reads carefully. And then he did the hardest thing any leader can do. He passed the torch. In front of the entire nation, he laid his hands on Joshua, his faithful assistant for 40 years, and named him successor. Be strong and courageous, for you will lead this people into the land. The Lord himself goes before you. He will never leave you. Do not be afraid. 0 bitterness, 0 resentment, 0 passive-aggressive comments. Moses understood that the mission was bigger than he was. The promised land was never about him. It was about Abraham's promise, centuries older than Moses. Moses was just one man in a story God had been writing for generations, and his part was done. At 120 years old, God told Moses to climb Mount Nebo, alone. From the summit he would see the promised land with his own eyes, but not cross into it. So he climbed. One final climb. The Bible says his eyes were not weak and his strength had not faded. After a lifetime of walking through deserts, he climbed one more mountain, unaided, at an age when most men cannot lift their own arms. And from the top of that mountain, God showed him everything. The land, the whole of it, Gilead as far as Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah stretching to the western sea, the Negev, the whole plain of Jericho, the city of palms, as far as Zor. The Bible takes its time listing what Moses saw, as if God wanted to walk him through every inch of it, personally, as if God was saying, look at all of this. All of this exists because you said yes at the burning bush. This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it. And there, with the promised land stretched out before him like a painting, Moses died. No trumpet, no angels visible to human eyes, no crowd, just a man and his God, alone on a mountain. The Bible says God himself buried him, not Aaron. Aaron was already dead. Not Joshua. Joshua was at the foot of the mountain with the people, God, in a valley in Moab, in a location that has never been found. No grave, no monument, no shrine, no tomb for pilgrims to kneel at. Just a secret place, known only to God. And here's why that matters. Because God knew his people. He knew that if there had been a tomb for Moses, they would have worshipped it. They would have made a religion out of it. They would have built temples to the dead prophet instead of serving the living God. So God hid the body, deliberately. But something strange happened after the burial. Something almost nobody knows about. It is one of the strangest verses in the entire New Testament. The book of Jude, chapter 1, verse 9. A single sentence. The archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to pronounce a blasphemous judgment, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." An archangel fought the devil over Moses' body. Think about what that means. Moses was so important that the prince of demons wanted his corpse, and the commander of heaven's armies had to be dispatched to stop him. Satan wanted Moses' body, probably to reveal it, to give Israel an idol, to corrupt the most important prophet in history into a false god. Michael fought him off, and won. This is how much Moses mattered, not just on earth, in the spiritual war that humans cannot see. In the cosmos, his body alone triggered an angelic battle. The last verse of Deuteronomy says this, "Since then no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel." The greatest prophet who ever lived. That is how God chose to remember him. Not the rock, not the punishment. His faithfulness. Now here's where people try to soften this story. They'll tell you that thousands of years later, Moses finally made it. At the Transfiguration, when Jesus took Peter, James, and John up a high mountain, two figures appeared in glory beside him, Elijah and Moses, standing on a mountain in the land he'd been forbidden to enter. And yes, that happened. But don't miss what it actually means. Moses never walked into Canaan with his people. He never tasted its milk and honey. He never saw the walls of Jericho fall. He never held the grapes of that land in his hands. He never watched Joshua divide the territory among the tribes. He never saw the Ark of the Covenant rest in Jerusalem. He never saw David. He never saw Solomon's temple. The sentence God passed at Kadesh was never lifted, never reversed, never forgiven. What happened at the Transfiguration wasn't a delayed prize. It was something far more devastating and far more beautiful. Moses wasn't there to collect what was taken from him. He was there as a witness, witnessing the one that rock in the desert had been pointing to all along, the Christ who would be struck once and from whom living water would flow for eternity. The rock Moses hit in anger, that rock was Jesus. And Moses, who had no way of understanding what he was doing that day at Kadesh, spent 1,500 years in eternity waiting to see it with his own eyes. Not in the land of milk and honey, not in Canaan, but on a mountain, beside the Son of God, watching the prophecy he had accidentally distorted finally come true. What did they talk about on that mountain? The Gospel of Luke tells us. They spoke of Jesus' departure, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. They spoke of the cross, the real cross, the one Moses had foreshadowed by hitting the wrong rock the wrong way. Moses had spent his earthly life trying to deliver God's people from bondage. And now he stood beside the one who would deliver all of humanity from bondage to sin, forever. That wasn't forgiveness. That was something else entirely. That was a purpose bigger than the promised land ever could have been. So was Moses forgiven? No, not for that act, not in the way we mean forgiveness. God loved him. God honored him. God spoke to him face to face. God buried him with his own hands on that mountain. God sent archangels to protect his body. God let him stand at the Transfiguration. But the thing he did that day at Kadesh, the consequence of it stood, for the rest of his earthly life, into eternity. And that's the weight this story leaves us with. You can be loved by God and still carry the cost of your choices. You can be called his friend and still be told that is enough. You can give 40 years of faithfulness and lose something you will never get back. The higher the calling, the heavier the fall. There are moments in every life where 5 seconds of anger rewrite 40 years of faithfulness. Moses found his at a rock in Kadesh. You might find yours somewhere else. Maybe it's already happened. Maybe you're carrying a consequence right now that God has not lifted, even though he has forgiven you. Maybe you've been asking him to reverse something for years, and all you hear back is silence. If that's you, listen to this. Moses was not abandoned. Moses was not rejected. Moses was loved until his last breath, but the door stayed closed, and the man who could not enter the land became the man who stood beside the Son of God in glory. Your closed door is not the end of your story. It might be the beginning of one bigger than you ever planned. Next, I'm telling the story of the man who did the exact opposite of Moses. A king with blood on his hands, a murderer, an adulterer, a betrayer, and the man God called a man after my own heart, someone who committed the unthinkable and was forgiven completely. If you want to understand the other side of God's justice, that video is on your screen right now. Click it.